Mr. Lipin, that you're welcome to stand here or sit there and just participate. And
Oh, you know what? I'll
this
take
is yours.
I'll take the podium.
Okay. This is Mr. John Lipin, who's on the NASTF Board of Directors, and he's agreed to broker this discussion between the panelists that he will introduce. I'll just let him introduce.
Thank you, Skip. It looks like we have a free chair here if anybody wants to join the discussion. My name is John Lipin. I'm with Motor Information Systems, and we have a lot to talk about today, a very important, very interesting topic, and certainly something that everyone in this room has been paying very close attention to for a very long time. And I think it's pretty easy to say, it's pretty clear to say that a lot has changed in the last year. A lot of movement, a lot of activity in right to repair. In the last year, we've had a referendum voted on and passed in the state of Massachusetts, and a statute's been enacted in that state. And then just earlier this year, we saw a memorandum of understanding signed by representative organizations of the aftermarket and automotive manufacturers. So joining us this afternoon, we have Steve Douglas from the Alliance of Automotive Manufacturers and Aaron Lowe from AAIA. And Aaron is going to begin our little presentation and discussion today with an overview and with an update on the Massachusetts Right to Repair statute and also on the Memorandum of Understanding.
Should do it to here? Or? Okay.
Whatever you prefer.
Sure. So I'm not going to go through the long and varied history of right to repair. I mean, we've all kind of lived through it for the last over 10 years. But I'm just going to go through what came out of the Massachusetts legislature last November, what the final result was, and then I'll talk about the MOU. And then I'll talk about where I see the NASTF role in Massachusetts in the MOU, and then we'll talk about some next steps. So for the legislation that passed the legislature, and that was the reconciliation bill that brought together the ballot measure that John was talking about, and the bill that passed the legislature, because there was two. It brought it together in one bill because there were two laws in Massachusetts, and now there's one. So for model year 2002 and beyond, all information, tools, and software that the dealers get, the car manufacturers have to make available at a fair and reasonable price to the independent aftermarket. And there are guidelines that are in the legislation for how fair and reasonable is to be defined. It's very similar to how the service information rules are implemented by EPA for fair and reasonable. Then starting and I've divided this up between under 14,000 pounds and over 14,000 pounds because there are two sort of differing requirements that came out of the Massachusetts bill. So this is under 14,000 pound vehicles. For model year 2018 and beyond, and this kind of refers back to the prior panel, all the OEs have to make their software and available to the independent aftermarket, all the diagnostic and repair software available to the independent aftermarket using a J2534 or an ISO 22900 interface. And so it works through a cloud where all the software is available through the cloud. It would be downloaded using a generic PC and then interfaced with the vehicle meeting one of the two specifications. And we believe most manufacturers will use J2534, although some may use 22900. And then all security information has to be available through the SDRM, Secure Data Release Model. Motorcycles are excluded from the definition of a motor vehicle, and that was done by the Senate. The motorcycle industry lobbied very hard to take motorcycles out since they don't have to meet diagnostic requirements, and I won't comment on that. Next slide. For vehicles over 14,000 pounds, and originally trucks were not included in the original bill that passed the legislature, but they were by the Senate in the final discussions on the bill in November of last year. So for model year 2013 and beyond, all information, tools, and software that the dealers get have to be available to the independent aftermarket for heavy-duty equipment. For model year 2018, the same requirements apply to heavy duty. However, a provision was added in there that is fairly controversial that says if the trucks are built to custom specifications, that's the term that's used in the bill, it doesn't have to be required to be provided through the standardized interface. Now, I don't know a lot about the truck industry, I'll admit that right off, but my understanding of the truck industry is that nearly all trucks are built to some custom specification, or for the most part, over 14,000 pounds, have a customized part of that. So no one really knows what custom specifications really means, but I kind of believe that it exempts them from most of the requirements of the standardized interface. We'll have to see how that plays out over time. There is some discussions about going in and revising that whole truck area, but at this point, this is a requirement for heavy-duty vehicles. Okay, for telematics, and this has been a point of discussion, telematics are excluded from the bill. However, if a manufacturer decides to only provide diagnostic repair information through telematic systems, and there's no other way for an independent shop to get it, then they would have to provide it telematically to the independent aftermarket. Originally, there was some discussion about excluding telematics. We didn't want this to become a loophole. So we said, okay, if you're going to exclude telematics, which we think is an important issue, but if we're going to exclude it, then we have to make sure that telematics are covered if it's not, that information is not available elsewhere through the usual tools. So that provision's in there. And then proprietary tools are permitted for specific specialized diagnostic and repair procedures. And maybe Steve can answer this at some point. What I understand is that sometimes there has to be a correction made to a vehicle, and the car company has to issue a special tool to address that. And so there is an exemption for that from the J2534 and ISO requirement. However, that tool has to be available to the aftermarket at a fair, reasonable price as well. Next slide. Okay, for the enforcement, shops first have to notify the OE in writing through NASTF to resolve the issue. The OE has 30 days to resolve it after they get that correction, the requirement to cure the failure. Then if they don't comply, then it's considered an unfair method of competition and unfair or deceptive act or practice. And then comes under the a consumer chapter in the Massachusetts statute. It's Chapter 93A. You bring the action against the manufacturer for damages, and it can be a class action suit against the manufacturers under the bill. So that would be if you couldn't get the information through the manufacturer. For the tool suppliers, the OE has to provide diagnostic and repair information to the aftermarket scan tools under normal licensing, contractual, or confidentiality agreement for the sole purpose of building an aftermarket tool. The car company is not responsible if the tool doesn't do what it's supposed to do. The aftermarket tool doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So there is a requirement for tool information to be available to the aftermarket tool suppliers. Slide. There are some provisions that were added by the new car dealers who, believe it or not, came and supported right to repair at the very end of the process in Massachusetts. And the main one is that if a dealer is repairing a car that is a non-nameplate vehicle, so say it's a Ford dealership and they get a Toyota car and they can't get the information from Toyota, then they can file an action as an independent under this Massachusetts law. So this was something the dealers really wanted. And then the car companies can't sell software and tools to independents in a manner or in terms that are more favorable than they give to the dealers. And then a car company could still develop a proprietary tool, notwithstanding all the other requirements, but the dealer is not required to purchase that tool unless it provides some additional functionality that they couldn't get through the tool. But the hope is that the J2534 tool will have all the same functionality as the dealer tool, and that's the intent of this whole bill. Now from that, after we passed the Massachusetts bill, the car companies represented by the Alliance and the global automakers met with AIA along with the Coalition of Fraud and Repair Quality, who were the main players in Massachusetts, and we developed a national memorandum of understanding. And the reason that we did this was, we thought if they're going to build in Massachusetts and we have a model, then instead of fighting this out state by state, let's come up to, everybody decided it's better to just, let's get this, we have a model, let's just do it nationwide. And I think we would all, would save a lot of money, time, energy, and also prevent a patchwork of different bills being passed in every state. So we came to this agreement in, I believe it's January or was it December?
It was January.
January, yeah, we came in January. It only covers 14,000 pounds and under. It does not include trucks and motorcycles, mainly because the truck industry did not come to the table to discuss the MOU. However, I will tell you that I believe that the truck industry is meeting with the aftermarket at some point in the very near future to talk about an MOU. Whether it happens or not, I don't know. But there are some discussions going on trucks. It includes a 30-day period to resolve for missing information. So an independent shop would have to first make a request to a car company directly to get the issue corrected. And if they couldn't, then we've established a dispute resolution panel, or we're in the process of establishing that. The dispute resolution panel will include 2 representatives from the aftermarket and 2 from the manufacturers. And then 1 independent entity that would be sort of like helping to resolve the issue, and that could be some consumer organization. We're not quite sure what that will entail. The dispute resolution panel is still a work in progress. It will occur, but we're working with the manufacturers to try to see how that's going to put that together at the moment. Okay, so the role of NASTF in all this is NASTF is actually mentioned in the Massachusetts bill as being the place where you have to file an action to get for the 30 days to give the manufacturer a chance to cure the problem. So NASTF is the first line of defense in Massachusetts. It's actually listed in the bill, although it could be another organization if NASTF were not to exist. It's not in the MOU, but certainly NASTF, and we're hoping, will play a major role in trying to be the first line of defense on resolving issues. I don't think we want any issues we want to minimize the issues that go to a dispute resolution panel, and we think NASTF could play a role in that in the meantime. And we hope that NASTF will become better known, because I think one of the big issues right now is that if you go outside in the industry, a lot of people don't know who NASTF is still, or don't know what it can play. And so I think that's one of the things we see NASTF playing a bigger role if it becomes better known to the rest of the country. And then for the heavy-duty industry, we'd like to see NASTF become, or something like NASTF, be available for the heavy-duty industry, because there's really nothing in existence right now to resolve issues for the heavy-duty aftermarket. Next steps, we're working with the OEs, as I said, to implement the MOU. There's a lot of details that have to be worked out. We're briefing interested groups like NASTF and others in the industry about the MOU and hoping to get a lot more publicity. We're trying to develop some guidance to help the industry understand what the MOU and Massachusetts law say and how they can take advantage of it and be part of this. And then we have to meet regularly as part of the MOU to discuss how is it working? Is it not working the way we wanted it to? Are there problems? So we're going to meet on I think we meet twice a year to try to resolve those issues. And then there's always other groups that have been invited to support the MOU and be part of it. And we're hoping that other groups will join and become part of this whole process. So that's what we're doing right now, and that's kind of a brief summation of what it does.
Thanks, Aaron. Steve, anything to add to that, or you want to go right to the questions?
I think Aaron summarized it well. I noticed that we're only on slide 26 of 48. I was kind of waiting on the other 21.
Those are the part. I took those out because they were all anti-car company stuff.
No, I had a chance to look at that, and I've worked with Aaron for many years now. So I think he summarized it very well and just laid out the details.
Yeah, we do have a few questions that we'd like to pose to Steve and to Aaron. Right after the Massachusetts statute was enacted, I think a lot of observers would have thought that the next logical step would be some movement toward a national referendum or toward a national resolution to this, a legislated national resolution. And I think that some of us were, frankly, a little bit surprised when we saw the MOU, and just wondering what the what the decision process was, what led up to the decision to stand down in the legal battle and to come to this agreement in the form of an MOU.
I guess I'll,
Go ahead, Steve, you start.
I'll start. I don't know if it would be standing down. I think what we established in Massachusetts is a solid solution. I think the big takeaway from Massachusetts is the 2018, the 2534, allowing diagnostics over a pass-through device. And I think that's the big step forward. A lot of the stuff 2002 and beyond is already available. And as far as whether it should be a national, I think we wanted a national, but anyone who's been through the federal legislative process knows that that's years and years and years in the works. And it just seemed like we had a solution that worked. So pushing that out through an MOU process, however we could do it, because in truth, manufacturers are going to do that. They wanted to do it. They wanted to get started. So it just didn't seem like it was necessary to wait 5 years to implement a federal legislation.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the realities. If we try to get something through Congress, and I'm not saying I wouldn't like this to be a law, but trying to get something through Congress is a huge undertaking, even if it's a post office these days. I mean, you just can't name a post office without going through some political issue. And so it would take years and years to get that done. You look at the resources it took to get this done in Massachusetts, they were huge, and it was a big fight. And here we had a solution that I think we were all fairly happy with. Could it be better? Sure, there's a lot of ways it could be better, but generally we're pretty happy with it. I think the goal now is to move forward and try to make sure that we get this implemented properly and that we get the information and tools out to the industry in a way that they can use it. And not spend the resources at this point after we've spent a lot of time getting here. So we had to make a decision, and I think we feel very comfortable with this decision. I think we're really excited about the future, and it's so far, developing the MOU, it's been a good working relationship with Steve's organization and with John's as well, with the global group.
Okay, thanks. It's hard to believe, but I think it's just about exactly 10 years ago that there was a letter of agreement that was signed back then between the Global and the Alliance and ASA at the time, and it also talked about access to information. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what differentiates this MOU from that 10-year-old agreement.
Well, the 10-year-old agreement was basically a paragraph. I think it did move down the road of getting information out there. I think what the bill, first of all, it's a law in Massachusetts, so it does have a certain more of a requirement to it, more of a mandate. It has a lot of other requirements in there. You have J2534 requirements in there that really couldn't have been even discussed back in 2002 when the ASA agreement was made. So I think it's a lot more specific. I think it's got some more requirements that are moving us into the future for diagnostic and repair and helping to address a lot of issues that that are in the independent aftermarket right now. So I think we've come a long way. I think there's a lot more. This is more of a mandate, but there's no doubt the ASA agreement kind of started this little path, and now I think we moved it to another level.
And I would agree. I think just to go back a little bit in history, the way we got to the ASA, we worked with, Aaron was involved in California when we first developed the service information requirements, and that's where we put information on the web, but it was limited to emissions only. And then EPA adopted something similar. So the ASA agreement said, okay, you're required to put this information for emissions only on the internet, which was a step up. Well, the ASA agreement said, okay, beyond emissions, we'll put everything on there, and that was the ASA agreement in 2001 and 2002. Then I think the next step, which Aaron's exactly right, we never envisioned using 2534 as a diagnostic to back in those days. I mean, 2534 was still in its infancy.
Yeah.
And
SDRM was never even, and that came about sort of because of the bill in California. And now we have an SDRM, and that's also required now as part of the Massachusetts bill. So, it's kind of a culmination of technology as we move forward.
Yeah, and that's the big thing with the Massachusetts and with the MOU is now we have the information on for 2534. Thanks, Tom. So I think that's the big step up. That's in 2018, and you know, there's some companies, Mark's companies, I think other companies already make diagnostics available over 2534, but the requirement in 2018 is across the board. So I think you'll start seeing companies start in 2015 and 2016, those that haven't already been there.
Aaron, you mentioned the fact that the MOU does not cover heavy trucks where the Massachusetts requirement does. And you also suggested that there might be some movement toward a heavy truck MOU. What do you think the likelihood is, even though I know that that's not your deal? What do you think the likelihood is, and what do you think needs to happen to actually see that happen?
There needs to be some pressure on the heavy-duty manufacturers to come to the table and negotiate. I think they have agreed to negotiate. Whether we'll get an agreement or not, I'm not clear at this point. You know, there is requirements in the Massachusetts bill, and I don't think the heavy-duty people want to see right to repairs on heavy-duty come up around the country. So I couldn't tell you the prognosis on that, but they are talking, which is a big step because we've not had any discussions previous to this. And you know, I was just on a panel last week with Charlie Gorman and on heavy-duty, and there's huge interest in the heavy-duty industry on this issue, on right to repair. They have some big problems in getting information. And so I think this issue is getting very much more high profile in the heavy duty than it's been. And I think heavy duty is maybe several years behind light duty, and the heavy duty manufacturer behind where the light duty manufacturers are on this issue. So there's still a little more work to do.
Steve, I'm guessing you have nothing to add to the heavy truck comments?
You want to go down that path?
No, we don't represent any of the heavy-duty truck manufacturers. One thing I did want to ask, though, about Aaron's presentation, I wondered if anyone had any questions about that. I know he covered a lot of stuff, and I didn't know if anyone had any questions on that.
Aaron's presentation?
That's perfect.
Yeah, it was pretty perfect.
You know, one other thing I would ask, maybe Aaron can let us all know. We're here talking about the MOU. If somebody wants to read the language of the MOU, and I know that you also published an FAQ sheet on the MOU.
It's all on our website.
It's all on the AIA
Yeah, it's at
website.
aftermarket.org. So if you want to go and if you want to see me afterwards, I can give you the address. But it's on the FAQ. We have frequently asked questions, and also the actual MOU is on the website if you want to see it. And if you give me your card, I'll email it to you. It's not a secret. We want people to see it.
Yep.
Also, we'll be changing the name of our association to the Auto Care Association next month, just so you all know
ACA.
that. No. I didn't. Thanks, Steve.
Shortly after the
Auto Care.
Shortly after the MOU was announced, I believe it was AAA came out and made a statement that they didn't think the MOU went quite far enough. And I'm just wondering if you anticipate many voices like that, or if you anticipate any further movements or initiatives toward legislation, or if you think that we're on a path to actually getting things done at this point.
I think we more than anticipate.
Okay.
AAA's already, they proposed legislation on Tuesday, so a couple of days ago in California, Senate Bill 994. So we do have legislation on that.
But you should clarify what that bill's about.
Yeah, the bill it covers a lot of the same ground, but it also includes telematics as well. So, like I say, it covers a lot of the same ground. I'm trying to remember the exact language of the bill, but their big take is that the telematics, and that's kind of what that bill is.
Yeah,
is
basically,
after.
it would give. They want the car companies to direct allow the car companies. I mean, the car owner. I'm sorry, to direct the information from their telematics system where they want it to go, and so that's the primary purpose of that bill. And we also expect other bills. There's also the possibility other bills could come up in other states. There are bills already introduced in New Jersey and a few other states. So those are just right to repair bills at the moment. So there is possibility there could be right to repair discussions in other states. As far as the MOU goes, we've all committed we are going to propose other right to repair bills in other states.
Yeah, and just let me be clear on why, from the OE side, that we wouldn't want to say take the Massachusetts bill and duplicate it in Colorado and California and everywhere else. I mean, it has specific provisions related to the Attorney General and related to the enforcement provisions. And the problem is when you start doing that in every other state, then you have 49, 50 different enforcement mechanisms, which are just impossible to deal with from a manufacturer's. I think what we want, and I think what the aftermarket needs, is to solve the problems, not endless litigation, not endless enforcement actions. So I think what we want to do is solve the problem. I think you have the enforcement capability in Massachusetts, and as we had said earlier, if there were a federal way to do it that didn't involve endless resources and years of time, then we'd look to do that. I just don't think that's a possibility.
I don't think anyone anticipates it, but the nature of the MOU is not a legally binding document with the automakers. And if, as time goes by, if one or more of the OEMs decide that they don't want to participate, they don't want to follow the rules, what happens at that point?
War.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I mean, this is an exercise in trust. I mean, we've come through the process. We've worked together to develop the MOU. We worked together on the Massachusetts legislation, and the goal is that, the car companies are to comply, and they're going to do good faith compliance. If it doesn't happen, then everybody knows we could be back at war at some point. I'm hopeful that doesn't happen. We want to move forward.
Yeah, and I'm confident as well that the manufacturers will comply with the MOU. I think a couple of things. One, I think Aaron's group and the aftermarket in general would have a pretty strong case if a manufacturer refused to comply with what they stated they would for different state legislation or federal legislation, either one. So there is absolutely vested interest from the OEM standpoint in meeting the requirements of this. And so I think that's kind of where we are. So I wouldn't anticipate. And just let me also talk a little bit about the 30 days to cure. And we've been involved, and I've been involved in NASTF for a long time, and I've been behind the SIRs for a long time. And it's really rare that you have a piece of data that's available to the dealer shops that's not available to the aftermarket, and it's so crystal clear that it's like, well, this document is available to the dealers but not to the aftermarket. We spend most of the SIRs are in that gray area in between. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, because we see it occasionally where a document just hasn't been posted, information hasn't been posted to the aftermarket, and that's fixed relatively quick. Most things wind up in this gray area where it's reprogramming, where it's subscriptions. It is so rarely nice and clear where there's a gap in information between what the dealers have and what the aftermarket has. So I think that's where NASTF comes into play, is alerting the OEM of this, and then digging around trying to find where does this problem lie? Is it an OEM problem? Is it an aftermarket problem? And that's kind of where we are. It's typically the gray area.
At the end of the day, it seems that it's really all about the MOU, the right to repair question, NASTF. It's really all about freedom of information, getting information accessible to the independent shops, and ultimately to the consumer, so that the consumer has an opportunity to choose where they get their vehicle fixed. Aaron mentioned the lack of visibility, or maybe the lack of knowledge of NASTF, and I'm sure of the MOU, and of all of these kind of behind-the-scenes workings that really do affect everyone in this market. And I'm wondering, just in simple terms, what do you think the MOU means today and in the future for a shop owner, for an independent shop owner, and ultimately for a consumer, even if they've never heard of it?
Hopefully, the long-term goal is that shops that want to make the investment in training and tools and information will have the ability to do so. I think there's a couple issues that we faced is that making sure that the cost is so high now in servicing cars because of the technology, and what we were seeking to do is to find a way to try to mitigate those costs for the independent shops. Have we done it? We'll see as this plays out, but we think it will. And we see the MOU just opening up the choices that the good shops who really make that investment will be able to compete and to provide the best service for the customer. Hopefully that's also going to mean a better ownership experience for the car owners, for the individual brands. As if they put out good software and good sites for the independent shops to get that information, then their cars will be more repairable and the owner will have a better experience when they get their car repaired. I mean, people go to the independent shops after the warranty. It's a fact of life. That's what they do. There's a lot of reasons for that, but the main place where you can lose that trust is if it goes to the independent shops and no one can repair it, and they're forced to go to a dealer that's not convenient for them. So from our point of view, it's to provide the opportunities for the independents to compete and to give the car owner the ability to be able to choose wherever they want to go to get repaired. And I think everybody wins from all that. And it provides a better competitive environment for the dealers to compete for the service work, and they're providing better service. So I don't see a lot of losers in this.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the big thing that Aaron and his group struck on was the 2534 and lowering the cost for independents to diagnose and repair vehicles. And just like Aaron said, and like the Massachusetts bill, a dealer is the same as an independent when they're working on a non-branded car. So if you're a Ford dealer and you're working on a Toyota, if you can use a 2534 device instead of buying the Toyota tool, that benefits the dealership, it benefits the independent. So I hope at least, and as Aaron said, we're some time away, I hope that the 2534 solution or 22900 works out so that it actually lowers the cost for the independents and for the dealerships to have solid diagnostics and repair. And I think, as Aaron said, I think everybody wins, the dealers, the OEMs, and the independents. So, I mean, to me, the big thing with Massachusetts MOU is 2534 and a common diagnostic and reprogramming tool.
I know right after the MOU was announced, NASTF did receive some questions about what's changing with the process. Does the NASTF, does the SIR process change any? And I think Aaron touched on that in his earlier comments, but I wonder if you have anything to add to that. So essentially today, nothing changes. For someone who wants to file a concern or a complaint, the SIR, the NASTF SIR process remains the same.
I think it remains the same. There may be some tweaks along the way as we go through this, but as I see it, NASTF is going to play a big role day to day, continue to play a big role. We hope it'll be stronger and more of a vital organization in the industry. But hopefully, right now, nothing changes from that end. It's just providing another level and hopefully an easy level to try to resolve problems.
Yeah, I completely agree. As I said earlier, we've been doing SIRs for 13, 14 years now, and I think the process of putting the independents in contact with the OEMs remains the same. So I think it's a good process. I think the OEs learn. I think the independents learn. I think it works today. I think it works the same way tomorrow, regardless of this.
Aaron also made a comment about the lack of knowledge, the lack of visibility of NASTF. And these are certainly things that we've always addressed and we've always looked at on the NASTF board. And I think it's safe to say that we are looking to get even more aggressive with ways to become more well-known and more public. Just a real quick story that Skip shared with us this morning in our board meeting. Skip has done a tremendous job in increasing the visibility of NASTF. And one of the points that he made to the board this morning was the importance and the value of trainers. And I think it was in the Vision Show, the Kansas City Vision Show, just a couple weeks ago. And Skip, we had a booth, NASTF had a booth at the show, and Skip made a point of noticing the swell of automotive technicians and shop owners that came to the booth based simply on the trainers that they had sat in earlier in the day talking about NASTF. So I would really encourage any of you trainers, and I know there's quite a few of you in the room here, as you're delivering your classes, you're familiar with NASTF. It really does help everyone if you can talk about it, get people familiar with it, tell them where to get more information. And I think we're out of time. Donnie, do we have any questions come over? No. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.